AskReddit by Zugkicks. What piece of history is deliberately being erased from existence? Everyone seems to know about North Korea being a nasty place, but they forget the country that's fighting it out with NK to be worst in any given category, Eritrea. It's in Africa, across the strait from Yemen, and very not part of Ethiopia. Military dictator, the law is what he says it is, conscription, displacement, the works. But little corruption. See, the law is what he says it is, which means that anything he does is legal, and if anyone does what he doesn't want, they've committed suicide. Don't forget Turkmenistan, also in the same boat. Rohingya is a very interesting one. They have been indigenous to the Rakhine state for centuries before being driven out in 2016. They were butchered and murdered, raped and expelled, with all evidence of being omitted from Burmese records. They now are spread all across Asia, where they are met with great hostilities and are currently globe-hopping, longing to return home. Also, just the general fact that Burma has been in a civil war for the last 75 years in general. Feel like I hardly ever see anything on the news about it. The banana republics. As much as I love bananas, I never buy Chiquita. There were more countries in the Axis force than just Germany, Italy and Japan. I am from Slovakia. We invaded Poland 15 minutes after the initial German attack. The business plot. Yes, a group of powerful Wall Street types tried to raise an army of 500k men to take the White House by force, overthrow FDR and put a fascist government in his place. And yes, Congress investigated it, under seal, and concluded the plot was real but never named the conspirators. Kinda like what's happening with Epstein. One of those conspirators was Prescott Bush, later Senator of Connecticut, father of President George H.W. Bush and grandfather of George W. Bush. Also, he did a lot of banking for Nazi financier Fritz Thyssen, before and during and after the war. Edit. Dealings with Thyssen were definitely before but perhaps not after the war. The bank's assets were seized and frozen during the war under the US Trading with the Enemy Act. We had human zoos until 1958. Actually, it was until 1993 in France. Expansionist Japan and the atrocities they committed during the 1930s are completely skipped over in most school curriculum, even though it was less than 100 years ago. I've always found that baffling. I have vivid memories from a video I watched in high school of an elderly Chinese woman explaining very stoically that when the Japanese invaded her community, the soldiers took her and assaulted her repeatedly, including, ostensibly for fun, sticking lead firecrackers in her vagina. In WW2, how France people in general were pretty okay and open to Nazi ideals. Under occupation, shipping people to camps, etc. But they pretty much rewrote the history, glorifying the resistance force who were just a little group of individuals resisting Nazi occupation. One of the last units defending Berlin was a French SS division. Serbs desperately try to negate all the atrocities they did all over Bosnia. I find it so ironic about this post about erasing history. The mods erase entire comment chains talking about erased history. The secret police in communist Romania, the Securitate, who would arrest, beat and torture those who oppose the regime, and its numerous collaborators who stabbed their neighbors in the back for benefits. I feel like it's not talked about enough. Right now there are a lot of older people who were part of the Securitate who never got punished for their actions. You can just see them walking on the street. I met a group of police forensic scientists and their attached documentary filmmakers, collecting evidence for the first trial in Danube Delta. It will also probably be the only and last trial of the Securitate. The people who were torturing and killing dissidents live in the village and of course deny the atrocities, while villagers confirmed they used to hear the screams coming from the prisons. The radical politics of Dr. Martin Luther King, Jr., particularly toward the end of his life. In his writings and speeches, he was far more radical than what is conventionally touted. Corporations wrap themselves in MLK quotes on the 15th of January and the 4th of April, but I would imagine that if Dr. King were alive today, he would be horrified at the level of wealth that these private sector entities have accumulated while we continually fail to provide the basic necessities for human dignity, such as affordable housing and living wages. I also wonder if his anger wouldn't just be directed at wealthy corporate interests but at the many progressive special interests that promote idealistic solutions to satisfy their own self-righteousness but result in nothing for the people they are supposedly fighting for. Helen Keller gets that treatment as well. Everyone seems to gloss over exactly what she was giving speeches on. Panama Papers. I still remember only a few months after they were released how I said barely anything changed and was unlikely to. Got downvoted every single time. Usually with a reply with how some Nordic countries, can't remember specifically, jailed a few seers and politicians, and how a journalist got killed over the reporting. But all in all, the rich kept on getting richer and the corrupt at the top got more corrupt. Korean comfort women used by the Japanese occupation force during WW2. Not just. There's Filipina, Taiwanese, Indonesian, Burmese, Dutch, Australian women as well. Basically, all lifestyles and pagan stories in Germany, France, etc. Basically all places affected by Romans before the people living there began writing. If I understand it correctly, only the names Woden and Anna are left from these times. Not erased but little known outside Alsace and Moselle, the story of the Malgranaus, in spite of ourselves dart. These are the people who, after the German invasion during the Second World War, had to fight on the German side, otherwise their families would be shot or sent to concentration camps. All war novels are written with a purpose in mind and the German WW2 accounts are typically about redemption and denial of the German army's complicity in atrocities. With that said, one of the best accounts of the war on the Eastern Front was by one of these Malgranaus soldiers. Although it's controversial, the Forgotten Soldier originally published in French as Les Soldats Oubliés is worth reading. Especially if you find one with the introduction from the American military archivist. Deleted. They killed 30 million plus Chinese people. Tibetan history, language, culture, religion. It's being erased daily, right now, and has been being erased for 60 plus years, now. Japanese war crimes and atrocities. Piggybacking on this, the US's failure to prosecute those involved in Unit 731. So that they could keep all of the research for themselves. The fact that the US protected those monsters. https://en.m.wiki.org/wiki/american_cover-up_japanese_war_crimes isn't talked about enough. The labor history of most of the world. People have little idea that things people today take for granted or even scoff at were fought for with blood. Those who brag about working long hours or laugh at safety regulations spit on their graves. Safety regulations are written in blood. Take the Triangle Shirtwaist Factory fire, for example. We have exit signs, keep stairwells unlocked, install fire sprinklers and smoke detectors, all because of incidents like this. Unit 731 isn't widely talked about outside of internet forums. Japan has deliberately tried to obfuscate its atrocities in WW2, sort of using Germany as the big bad guy and hoping people don't think about Japan's activities in China and Korea. Largely they've been successful. I recently went over the number of casualties on the Pacific Front during World War I and I had no idea the numbers were that great. I figured it was at least 5 to 10 million, boy was I wrong. So much death. Buddhism in Afghanistan. Zoroastrianism as well. The Mormon Church has spent 75 years obfuscating their own history of racism, sexism and fraud. I believe in 1978 God changed his mind about black people. Others have said Native American history, and that's certainly true, but I want to specify something important about this: their languages. Many tribes of selected tongues have only a handful of speakers left, and many of them are elderly, and before too long, after they pass, these languages will be dead. It is extremely unfortunate that there's little to no effort to try to retain these languages, keep them alive, and keep them going for future generations, but that's unlikely. Probably within a few short years many of these languages will be gone forever. There was a CS professor at Southern Oregon University who was working with native speakers to preserve their languages before they died out. He wrote custom software to help catalog and record everything, including pronunciation, for future generations. Turkey's extermination of Armenians. And shout out to Azerbaijan actively destroying ancient and medieval Armenian churches and artifacts. They also have some truly bizarre ideas regarding the origins of the Armenian people and alphabet. The US occupation and pacification of the Philippines. Read up on it. It was unnecessary and cruel. 1898-1912. They weren't independent until 1946. 1912 is just when the occupation started to be successful.